The Australian Meat Board presents number 2 in the series, Meat Makes the Meal. Moist heat cooking. Moist heat cookery covers a tremendous range of meat dishes, a never-ending variety of recipes suitable for every occasion, making use of virtually any meat cut at all, particularly economy cuts. With more on the subject, here's Barbara Lynch of the Sydney County Council's Home Management Service.
I love the aroma of a hearty beef stew, don't you? Stewing is just one example of moist heat cookery. Casseroles, braises, even pot roasts come under this general description. But in more scientific terms, what we do is use moist heat to tenderize the connective tissue of the meat we're cooking. As an extra bonus, moist heat cookery gives us a chance to infuse the meat with many different flavors and spices. So it is, in fact, a very interesting and rewarding method of cookery. And you can usually pre-cook and reheat these dishes for serving later. You can successfully cook any cut of meat with moist heat, but because it's a method that makes the normally less tender cuts of meat melt in the mouth, you might as well practice economy when choosing the meats. Meat from older animals and cuts from hard-working muscles of younger beef animals usually sell at prices below those of roasting and grilling cuts of beef and lamb. Good moist cookery cuts include chuck steak, shin meat, the less tender steaks, and so on. Many people claim that these cuts have a much better flavour, which is another bonus to consider when you choose economy cuts for moist heat cookery. To begin with, let's define the general accepted differences between a stew, a braise, and a casserole. In a stew, the meat and other ingredients are just covered with liquid and simmered on the hot plate. If you have the same meat and ingredients in a covered oven-proof dish and cook that in the oven, then you have a casserole. Braising differs because much less liquid is used. A braise may be very slowly simmered on the hot plate or cooked en casserole in a slow oven. Because recipes vary considerably for stews, braises, and casseroles, I won't show any one in particular, but let's look at one or two aspects of preparing and cooking these dishes. What about utensils? A sharp kitchen knife for cutting meat and vegetables, a wooden board to cut on, and a set of tongs, a wooden spoon, and a measuring jug and measuring spoons. Saucepans for stews should be of good weight and have good heat conducting properties. Casserole dishes need to be of oven-proof material and the lids must fit well for best results. For a stew or casserole, cut meat into pieces. This piece of chuck steak is excellent for my stew. Browning the meat pieces at the beginning in a little hot fat, oil or butter gives flavour and seals in the meat juices. Brown one layer at a time to keep the temperature of the pan fairly constant. Don't try and brown too many pieces at once. Use tongs so that you don't pierce the meat pieces and let the juices escape. Next, saute onion at a lower heat to bring out the flavour. And this is a fairly basic start for most moist heat meat cookery recipes. Other vegetables may be cooked with the meat in a stew, but keep them a reasonable size and don't forget, stir with that wooden spoon. Add a little extra seasoning at this stage, some herbs, a dash of Worcestershire sauce, salt, and pepper. Then return the browned meat to the pan with the stock. Stir occasionally whilst bringing to simmering point. Adjust heat so that the stew simmers gently. Cover with the lid and allow it to cook for about an hour and a half or until the meat is tender. When the stew is cooked, thicken with flour or corn flour which has been blended with a little cold water. For a final touch of colour and flavour, add some chopped parsley. To prepare a casserole, almost the same procedure is followed as I've shown for making a stew. Remember that a casserole is really a stew cooked in the oven in a covered casserole type dish. For a casserole, you may want to coat the meat pieces in seasoned flour before cooking. The plastic bag method is the easy way to do this. If your casserole dish can be used on the hot plate, you can brown the meat and saute the onion in it. Otherwise, use a pan or skillet and transfer ingredients to the casserole dish. Stir in flour and cook for 1 minute before adding the liquid, which can be a blend of stock, some wine, tomato puree, or whatever your recipe calls for. Pour this sauce over the meat in the casserole. Note that the liquid just about covers the meat. The lid should fit well. Cook in a preheated oven using moderately slow heat, 160 degrees Celsius or 325 degrees Fahrenheit. That's important. A moderately slow oven. Cook the casserole for an hour or so before adding other vegetables. Then return it to the oven for another hour to finish cooking. This will mean that the main vegetables will be cooked, but not beyond recognition by the time the meat is tender, juicy, and ready for serving. So much for stews and casseroles. What about braising? I have one here ready for cooking. Most recipes call for fair-sized pieces of meat for braising, and often to cook them resting on a bed of flavouring vegetables. Although there is only a small amount of liquid used in braising, moist heat cooking will carry the flavours into the meat. The juices left after cooking will form the sauce. A braise is usually cooked by simmering very slowly on a hot plate in a saucepan with a tight-fitting lid. It can also be cooked in a slow oven, using an oven-proof dish well covered to keep in the moisture. I can't emphasize too much this cooking on the simmer for moist heat cookery. If these dishes are cooked at boiling point, the protein in the meat hardens, and the lovely melting tenderness of moist cooked meat will take a long and wasteful cooking process to achieve. While cooking, there should only be an occasional bubble breaking the surface.
Let's just go back over some of those points on moist heat meat cookery. There are the 3 basic dishes. Stews, cooked in plenty of liquid on the range. Casseroles, again with ingredients submerged in the cooking liquid but cooked in the oven. And braises, using only a little liquid. The recipe you are following will give detailed instructions on preparation and cooking each dish. All need to be cooked in utensils with tight-fitting lids, which will help maintain the moist heat and bring out the flavour of the meat. Important, use only gentle heat for cooking. A moderately slow oven for oven-cooked casseroles, or just simmering for range-top cookery. Don't allow them to boil during the cooking period. Use vegetables for flavouring, but add main vegetables to the dish later during cooking so they won't be overcooked. When cooking stews that require thickening, do this at the end of cooking time to prevent sticking. Meat dishes cooked by the moist heat cookery method are most suitable for pre-cooking. Store in refrigerator or freezer until required to be reheated and served as a quick, convenient, delicious and nutritious meal. And as always, serve attractively.